Hey, this is Jeff Massey with Reverb.com, and today I want to talk about different tunings you can use for playing slide guitar, among other things, but mainly we're talking about slide guitar today. And right now I've got this SG tuned to open G, so I have my G chord right here. A lot of players really like to play slide guitar in the open G tuning. I mean, dating back as far as blues players like Robert Johnson, you know, up to people like Jimmy Page, the Rolling Stones, the Black Crowes. I think, especially when learning slide, it's a cool tuning to get started in, because the way the notes line up, it would be easier than playing, say, in standard tuning, for example. And there's sounds you can get in open tuning that you can't get in standard, and vice versa. For example, like when you're in a standard tuning, you really have to concentrate a lot on single notes. But with an open tuning, you have these advantages where you have whole chords, like you have your G chord here. So right at the 12th fret, I also have a G, but I can play just about every string, not so much the low E. That's why Keith Richards has a tendency to take his off on his open G guitars, I believe. But you know, you can play single note, but you have, you know, when you're learning, it can be frustrating to keep those other strings still, so you have that advantage. If you do play a group of notes, it sounds good. Another cool thing that I like about open G tuning is, you know, because you have certain strings that are tuned down and certain ones that aren't, your notes line up differently for scales, like they would in a standard tuning. So for example, you know, like I can find different blues scale patterns, you know, just in the key of G for now. Get that cool low note there that I wouldn't be able to grab if I were in standard tuning. And same thing up here. Things like that, where I'm grabbing two notes a string apart. You always have that, I don't want to say crutch, but you can always count on, you know, playing the other strings. If you're at loss for a lick, you can always rest there. Another thing I'd like to mention with this open G tuning, if you were to tune in this same configuration up a whole step, then you would have open A, which is, you know, the same thing, just a whole step up. So all these licks that I'm doing here in G would also translate up to A. The next tuning I'd like to talk about would be open D tuning, which means I'm basically tuned to a D chord, and if I were up a whole step, that would be open E. I mentioned open E because that's the same configuration, and equally as common with Elmore James. Of course, I think Derek Trucks plays a lot in open E. So whatever you do in open D can translate to open E as well. But the cool thing about open D is, again, the notes line up a little differently than they do in standard, of course, and open G. And I get, you know, that same lick at the 12th fret I was doing earlier is going to sound a little different now. So you get a lot of really cool half-step things going on. Another thing I like about open D is, you know, if you do any fingerstyle stuff with the slide, you can get a nice kind of syncopated rhythm. And open D has a tendency to be a little more swampy sounding than some of the other tunings. It kind of, you know, really captures that Mississippi Delta feel. You know, you get these nice, cool low tones. So you get that really dark sound. But, you know, it's versatile too, because just by a few shifts in tone, And of course, another tuning I would like to talk about with the slide is good old standard tuning. Standard tuning might be a little frustrating for somebody just beginning on the slide. I say frustrating because, like the open tunings where you can play a group of chords, in standard tuning doesn't sound too hot. The notes, the way they line up. You can do little doubles. But as far as striking 5 or 6 strings at a time, that would be a little tricky in standard. But one cool thing about standard is, whatever scales and tones and licks you're familiar with regular fretted guitar playing, you can do the same thing with slide. None of the notes have changed. So, for example, if I've got an E pentatonic scale and I'm going, I would do it the same way with a slide. But the difficult thing is a lot of single note lines when you're playing standard, and you really have to concentrate, again, like I talked about in earlier videos, keeping control of the right hand and keeping the strings you're not using at bay. So that's the main trick. But once you get past that, playing right there in your standard pentatonic positions. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you have fun trying out these different tunings and slide techniques. And next time in future videos, we're going to delve into some more licks for each tuning. So until then.